Good evening. Today is Monday, October 10th, 2022, and this is the 119th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Before we begin our podcast tonight, I do want to take this opportunity to send our blessings to the Italian Americans on this Columbus Day. Columbus Day commemorates Christopher Columbus landing in the Americas in 1492. It was unofficially celebrated in several cities and states as early as the 18th century, but did not become a federal holiday until 1937. For many, the holiday itself is a way of honoring Columbus's achievements and also celebrating Italian American heritage. Today also marks the 111th years since the Wuchang uprising that toppled the Qin dynasty and established the Republic of China, or the ROC. And it is the 73rd year that the ROC has celebrated its birthday in Taiwan. Where extended prayers go out to the people of Taiwan who are now living on the knife's edge on a daily basis, not knowing when the Chinese Communist Party will decide to invade the small island nation. My guest today is my dear friend, Michael Yon. Michael is America's most experienced living combat correspondent who is coming to us from London on this 300th day since the Russia-Ukraine war began to discuss the global escalation of backyard wars. Mike spent a great amount of time with the combat troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Michael's dispatches from the front lines have earned him the reputation as a preeminent independent combat writer of his generation, and I would say of our time. His work has been featured in Good Morning America, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNN, ABC, Fox, and hundreds of other major and minor media outlets around the world. Before we begin, I do want to show you a video clip that Sim Production had put together about Mike's work.
So this is it. This is storming the castle. Some drama's going on down here. We need to oil. Look at the squeaking armor from the police. They don't have their mask.
Mike, it's good to have you here today. Thanks for coming from London. I know it's late at night for you there, but today marked the 300th day since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, and I just wanted to kind of capture your thoughts and ideas of where we are and where's Europe today.
Hey, Sargis. Yeah, I've been in Europe now for going on my 4th month now. As you know, I was down in Mexico, and I saw that the Dutch farmers were starting to act up in Netherlands, blocking roads and whatnot. So I flew from Mexico over to Netherlands and spent a lot of time with those farmers. In fact, I did a show with Jordan Peterson about 2 hours, and then he asked to come over and spend some time with me. So I took him. I spent 2 days with Jordan in Netherlands after we did our interview, and he I think gained a lot from it as well. He's been talking about it a lot on his shows. And so I was over in Germany and also where else? Luxembourg, Belgium, Hungary, Austria, and Ireland. Just got back from Ireland to spend almost a week there, and then flew into London. And basically, I'm just doing a roundup of Europe, checking the situation here. As you know, last year I was in Morocco and Greece and Lithuania, also Bulgaria, checking the situations on the migration issues, and also now food and energy are acute problems here. Any politician at this point who has not really cleared the schedule to focus on energy, food, and war and elections in the United States is just not a serious person. I mean, we're clearly going into famines. The famine situation is going to be intense starting in 2023. We can see it starting to kick up now. Now, of course, as you know, I've been warning about this since January of 2020. So I've been warning about it now for more than 2.5 years. It's got a slow flash to bang for most famines. And that's why if you know what you're looking for and you're watching, you can sense these long before they happen. Not all famines. Some famines can happen suddenly. But usually most famines have a long flash to bang. For instance, the Irish potato famine, that is, well known for reaching a peak in 47, 48, 1847, 1848. It really sort of started in 1845, and a lot of people ignored it. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And a thing about famines is they're like fires. They're like an indoor fire. It starts off small, and then in a couple of minutes, it can engulf the entire inside of the home. And that's the way that famines often are. They kind of start off slow. You'll see people starting to complain about prices, or maybe they're hungry. The economy starts to collapse, or the food problems are originally from a food collapse. Often in almost all cases, there's a big man-made component. Not often, but in most cases, there's an element of warfare involved in famine, in which some enemy is using often some natural preconditions, such as the Irish potato famine. There was a fungus, right? And the fungus was, and it didn't just affect Ireland, it affected Belgium, it affected France, it affected other places as well. But so there was that fungus that destroyed huge amounts of the potato crop, and then the English came in and used that as a lever against the Irish. Of course, a lot of Irish were involved too. The Irish were not innocent in their own demise with that. Their population has never recovered. I just spent almost a week in Ireland, including with Sinn Féin, which is the Irish Republican Army political wing. And I was with the leader, actually, Mary Lou McDonald. And I can tell you, most of the Irish people I spoke with have no clue about the conditions that are forming around them at this point. The Irish seem to be under some sort of information secure, like everything's going to be okay. Never have a famine here again. We've learned our lessons. We've got less than 7 million people on the island. We can export food for 45 million. I keep hearing things like that. It's complete. It's just untrue. When I talk with experts in Ireland, they'll say we have no food issues whatsoever. But ask, okay, what are your real imports look like? I mean, you export a lot of beef and that sort of thing, but that's not the whole story. You import your energy, mostly. You import your fertilizer. You import a lot of your foodstuffs. You are not some self-contained Ireland. Every island on Earth, to my knowledge, at this point, is in danger, right? Including Hawaii. Hawaii includes 90%, imports 90% of their food, right? And now the population's bigger than it's ever been. Japan imports 70% of their food. A big problem that Europe had, not Europe, but the world has, but it's showing itself in Europe very quickly, natural gas. A lot of people that don't study the energy issue think, oh, we can just throw up some more windmills, which are nonsense, but they're all over Europe. And solar panels, which I have plenty of solar panels myself, they have obvious uses, but we're not going to run your country on solar panels and windmills. And for some of the things that we need, you simply need natural gas, period. There is no way to get around the fact that nitrogen-based fertilizers require natural gas or coal gas to create ammonia, urea, ammonium nitrate. About 4 billion with a B people exist on the earth because of these nitrogen-based fertilizers. These nitrogen-based fertilizers were starting to be created. There was a German chemist named Fritz Haber. And in 1905, Fritz Haber, the German chemist, of much repute, involved in poison gases later, but Fritz Haber wrote a book on thermodynamics in which he described how natural gas might be used to combine with atmospheric air, strip the nitrogen off of about 79% of the air that we breathe is nitrogen, right? And so take this nitrogen out of the air that we breathe and combine it with hydrogen and make ammonia, right? So urea, ammonia, all these things that can be used for these nitrogen-based fertilizers come from that process. So that was called the Haber process. So in 1905, he wrote that thermodynamics book. He described the process. And in about 1908, he got a few drops out in a beaker where he actually could make a little bit of it. So he proved that. That was when Karl Bosch came along. Karl Bosch, also a German chemist, he's the one that took the Haber process made by Fritz Haber and made it industrial. And he did that at BASF plant in Ludwigshafen, Germany, right? So they started building that in 1913. And then by 19, they were in full production with nitrogen-based fertilizers in Ludwigshafen. I was just in Ludwigshafen twice in the last few months. Ludwigshafen produces massive amounts of ammonia-based fertilizer, which is dependent on Nord Stream, which now is offline. We all know that. There's other gas puts that are going offline. Let's get right to the fertilizer. 26 major fertilizer plants throughout Europe that create nitrogen-based fertilizers. 26. They are all either offline or mostly offline now. And the rest that are not offline yet are going offline, right? And so what we're looking at here is just famine. There's no way to avoid this ice. They're going to get hit. When huge numbers around the world are going to starve to death. There's no way around it at this point. The question is, how many, where, when? 2023 will be when it really starts. It's already starting, but by 2023, it's going to really kick in. And certainly by 2024, there's no question about it, it will be severe, right? And so, recently when Jordan Peterson was Netherlands, again, I was with him for 2 Netherlands. I arranged dinners for 2 days with him. One night was with a scientist, and another night was with a retired CEO of a former Dutch chemical plant who made ammonia fertilizers. And this CEO said, India and Brazil are highly dependent upon nitrogen-based fertilizers that are made in Europe. And there's not enough to send to them, right? There's just not enough. And so India is going to go into famine because they're not going to get it from China. They're not going to get it from Russia. India can't make it, not enough. And likewise with Brazil. Now I see you putting up that cutting and burning European forest. I just drove probably 1,000 miles around Germany. I drove Netherlands over to Prague, and I was at Ludwigshafen a couple of times. And then I drove down to Hungary and Austria and then back to Netherlands and crisscrossing all over Germany. Let me tell you what, they're cutting down those forests at an extraordinary rate. So this green energy, well, there are thousands of windmills all over the place. They are cutting down forests at a rate that I have never seen. I was talking with General Mike Flynn yesterday about it. I said, you know what? I would really like to see what this looks like on a satellite from last year to this year. And then we're going to go into the winter time here very shortly, 48 days from now or so. And not that I'm counting, but the thing is so they're cutting down millions and millions of green trees. And anybody here who's used wood to heat a home, and I don't mean to have a romantic fire or a Christmas fire or something like that. I'm talking about honestly heat your home. Like I have a friend in Michigan, which is about the same as Germany, right? And I lived in Germany 4 years, now 2 years. So I lived in Europe 6 years, right? So I'm quite familiar with the climates all around. I've been all over the continent, right? It's cold, very cold. So parts of it are like Michigan. And my friend in Michigan, he uses for a 2,000-foot home, which is modest, of course, he uses about 10 to 15 cords of wood per year. 10 to 15 cords of wood. Now, a cord of wood is 4 feet high, 24 feet long, and 16 inches deep. I'll say again, 4 feet high, 24 feet long, and 16 inches deep. He uses 10 to 15 of those per year. One 2,000-foot home, square foot home. Now, we're talking about all of Europe is going to be cold, right? And so they're cutting down green trees. People, again, they've had a lot of romantic fires and fireplaces and might light it up every once in a while. They don't depend on that firewood to heat up their water, to cook with, to honestly keep the home warm for months on end. So we're talking about to keep Germany and Europe warm, you'll have to cut down all the forest, green. So, and a lot of it's like pine and stuff. So green wood, it takes about 2 years to season it, right? It's not going to burn well at all. If it burns, the wood that burns is going to have a lot of soot. It's dangerous. It puts creosote in the chimneys, which can burn your homes down because it accumulates. And this is really, it creates a lot of pollution burning green wood and wet wood. So, it's going to be cold. It's going to be winter, and the smoke has hugged the ground, as is a lot. For instance, when I lived in Poland, those 2 winters, the coal smoke was on the ground all the time. Your cars, if you rub your clothes against the car, you would get black from the coal soot on your car. I mean, we're talking about, we're going to have an air quality index that probably looks like Beijing, and I watch air quality index pretty often because I travel the world a lot. And when you're landing in China, for those who've never been to China or India, a briefing, you've seen the flies that get caught in amber, little fossilized flies, or not really fossilized, but you know what I'm saying? The flies trapped in amber. When you're landing in Beijing and the sun's just right, you feel like that fly is landing, and like, are we ever going to land? Are we going to get stuck in this cloud and carried away? I mean, that's how thick it is. You can't even see the ground until you're almost on it. So it's horrific. And we're looking at, just watch the air quality index as we go into January, February. Now, Germany is going to run out of energy this year. They're clearly going to run out. And by the way, remember what I'm telling you now, Yamal pipeline. We know Nord Stream is now not working. Russia also cut off a pipeline that goes through Austria down to Italy, not working. There was also what appears to be sabotage at a refinery down there. There are all kinds of things going, sabotage at a train, sabotage here, sabotage there. And Yamal pipeline goes from Russia through Ukraine over to Poland into Germany. I would expect, I don't know, within 24 hours, that thing's not going to be working. I'm surprised working. Then there's the Norwegian flows, not Nord Stream, but Norwegian flows that go to UK and Germany and other places. These are all we're into an infrastructure war here, right? And we're talking about, we have a larger population now than we've ever had in human history. And it is contingent on like nitrogen-based fertilizers. It's contingent on a lot of things, like many of these islands out there have populations now, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Japan. They have populations which simply cannot be sustained without external inputs, which are being wrecked, right? Methodically wrecked. Yeah. We've got a lot of, we see, anyway, I'll talk all night, Sargis, so I should be quiet. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
No, look, you have plenty of knowledge. You guys and gals that are coming to the show want to listen to you being on the ground and seeing what you're saying. And look, everything you just said, we have seen here. I do have a video. I do want to talk about the energy piece. Show that video, come back. I'm going to give you my thoughts, and then I want you to give me what you know from the ground. So we'll go to that video of one of those pipelines you just talked about.
In a move that Europe hopes will ease its energy crisis, leaders have inaugurated a new pipeline delivering gas from Norway to Poland. The Polish Prime Minister was joined by counterparts from Denmark and Norway, as well as EU representatives. It comes at a convenient time, as Europe is trying desperately to find new energy sources, and after Denmark and Sweden's discovery of a massive leak on the Nord Stream pipeline.
Today we are entering a new era, an era of energy sovereignty, of energy freedom, and of enhanced security, one of energy security and also of security in the broader sense of the word.
This completion comes at a time of Russia's brutal war against Ukraine and Russia's manipulation of gas supplies to destabilize our energy market and our economies. So today, we in Europe together are sending a powerful message that Russia will not succeed.
The project, which has been completed ahead of time, is an extension of an existing pipeline that will benefit mainly Poland, but also neighbouring states. Polish gas company PGNiG said in a statement the pipeline could deliver 6.5 billion cubic metres of gas in 2023. And a further 7.7 billion cubic metres the following year.
So look, it's very important for people to know that, most individuals think that, war at the global level has to do with ballistic missile capabilities, satellites, but it really has to do with the infrastructure. You destroy infrastructures, you could control anything. I know that when Nord Stream 1 and 2 were damaged, it created the largest amount of methane globally that had been detected from that one leak. Now it's a matter of whether or not Russians and the Americans are blaming each other. But I do want to kind of touch upon a couple of the timelines. I know that on September 12th, while visiting Berlin, the Israeli Prime Minister at that time, Lapid, stated that Israel could now produce 10% of the gas that Europe received last year from Russia. On Monday, September 26th, which was the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, actually, that's when the two underwater leaks were detected in Nord Stream 2 pipeline that initially were looked at as being underwater explosions by the Swedish and Danish data gatherers. The day later is when this pipeline, the 27th, came online when Poland, Norway, and Denmark, as you saw in the video, attended a ceremony to mark the opening of the new Baltic pipeline, as they call it, which is a critical stage for weaning Poland and the rest of Europe off of Russian gas. And the pipeline is supposed to transfer from the Norwegian Shell to Denmark and the Baltic Sea to Poland, that gas. On September 30th, during a joint press conference with the Canadian Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, Secretary of State Blinken stated that the Nord Stream pipeline explosion was a tremendous opportunity. So I know that Deputy Ambassador to the UN stated that we categorically have not been involved in this explosion. Anybody who says anything else is actually speaking contrary to what the U.S. position is. From your perspective, do you think that the nation states understand that there needs to be at least a slowdown of this process, or do you think this is just going to ramp up? I know what the answer is because you and me have seen war and we know how it escalates. It doesn't have a ramp down until one side or another side loses. But what is your take as to where we're going to be possibly with what is happening currently on the ground as this fight is taking place by countries going after the infrastructures to ensure that they could win when it comes to the energy sector?
Well, it's really playing out exactly how I and some others just go back and read what I wrote before the invasion. That this would get out of control because that's what wars do. Any monkey can start a fire, and the fire started. And at this point, it's just out of control. Nobody is in control. It's clearly expanding. It's clearly going to be an infrastructure war, as many of us warned. And again, this pipeline. I love Poland. I lived in Poland for 2 years. Actually, I went to a language school for Polish, and Poland is just near to my heart. At the same time, it is sort of coincidental that they opened that pipeline right after the explosions on Nord Stream 1 and 2, wasn't it? A thing about this, a lot of things, people are not paying attention to the details. The details are important. So there's more gas going into Poland now, but it's not going to places like BASF. It's not going to these places which are nitrogen-based fertilizers that we need. There is clearly what I call a gigacide unfolding. A gigacide meaning billion. We're not talking about a mere genocide at this point. We're not talking a million people dying of famine in China. There's a great book on that called Mao's Great Famine, by the way, which I read. We're not talking about a few million dying and a whole lot more in Ukraine or a million dying in Ireland. We're talking about potentially billions with a B dying in a famine. Billions. We're talking gigacide, right? We've got this, we've got the death vaxes, we've got many things going on. Open borders. We have no borders in the United States at this point. When you get into famine, I would recommend everybody read at least 5 books on famine, and I would do it now. Don't wait, because the more you study this, the more you can, and you'll understand some of the patterns that unfold. I would read a book on Irish famine. A good one is called The Famine Plot. Another one's called Black Potatoes. I read 3 books on Irish famine. Red Famine's a good book on Ukraine famine, 32-33. Actually, is written by Anne Applebaum, interestingly, because she's one of the globalists who appears to be creating this famine. Of course, she's studying the Ukraine famine in such detail to write such an excellent book. It makes me wonder. Anyway, but then another one is Mao's Great Famine. I've read about 20 books on famine and about 60 on pandemic. So that's about 80 books between pandemic and famine. And of course, hundreds on war. But every pandemic that you read, every book on pandemic that you read has some component of famine, right? And every famine has pandemic, famine, war, right? The triangle. If you get a big war or a big famine or a big pandemic, you always get the other two. There are no exceptions. I'm not talking some small war on a small island, Grenada or something, more of a battle there, right? I'm talking about an honest war like we've got going on now in Ukraine. It's actually quite global. It's growing. You will always get pandemic and famine from this. Actually, during famine, most of the people don't die from starvation. Most of the people die from disease. Typhus usually kicks up after a few months. I'm starting to see typhus kick up around the world. I check it every day on my own personal morning thing between me, myself, and I. I'm always watching typhus. I'm always watching cholera. I'm watching different things that always march with famine. And so we see typhus and cholera picking up now. But to skip past that point, these three things, the triangle of death, pandemic, famine, war, panfa war, they also create something else that there, and that's HOP, human osmotic pressure. The human osmotic pressure, the push and pull of migration, that osmotic pressure that either pushes people out like a fire, famine, war, pandemic, or the negative pressure that people in, like it's better over there, right? And so you'll get these permanent changes in demography from, like, for instance, between 1845 and 1852, at least 1 million of them left, right? For instance, to the United States and to they went to Australia, they went to New Zealand, they went to Argentina, they went all over the world, right? And a lot went to Argentina, interestingly. And so and then never went back. And the population of Ireland has actually never recovered. But so the bottom line is we're going through a period of fundamental changes where we don't even have borders in the United States. Europe is wide open. I was just in Luxembourg a couple months ago, spent about a week there. It's about 50% migrants now. And I don't mean controlled migration where you can bring in enough that everybody kind of has time to, raise their family up and kind of we become one and melt together, the sort of quote unquote melting pot. I'm talking about they're coming in such numbers that they form these anthro-insulas, the human islands, and anthro-insula, right? The human island. So right now, for instance, in Luxembourg, used to be the jewel of Europe, it's about 50% migrants. Outside of Telwindow, I was there for almost a week. There was at least 10 fights on the streets just around my hotel. At least, it's unbelievable. And there was clear, like, African gangs running drug networks around my hotel. This is downtown Luxembourg City, jewel of Europe, right? It's just, there was defecation all over the sidewalks in this once incredibly beautiful place because they just opened the doors. In fact, during the entire time I was there, almost a week, I only met one guy who said he was actually from Luxembourg. Everyone else I met was somewhere else. So think about what the globalists have done. They've taken Luxembourg. And so that's like a board that they've taken, a square that they've taken off the chessboard, right? And they're doing them in Belgium and Netherlands. And what it's creating in Hungary, of course, I was just over in Hungary and Austria. I was just there as well. It's creating conditions for civil war. There's going to be, especially when the food situation becomes intense, people start fighting each other. And that's just what happens. And it doesn't take like 3 months to do that. It takes like missing 3 days of food, and then it's game on, right? And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at that here in London as well, and Ireland. Ireland has just, Ireland is incredibly famous for being highly racist, and they've earned it. But at the same time, when I was out with Jen Fain, they're just like open border. They've now just totally thrown the borders open like some weird thing took hold of their head. They don't have enough housing for their own people. That's a daily problem that you hear about in the almost week. I was just in Ireland. They're talking about housing all the time. We don't have enough housing. Children are living in MBs, children living in hotels, while they continue to pump people in from Africa, right? Huge numbers of people from all over the Africa and Asia, especially Africa, and they don't have enough room for the people already, right? And that's the same situation you find in Netherlands, and that's the same situation you find in Germany. Right now, as we speak in Germany, the government is building what they call heating islands or heating stations. These are for the winter when it's going to be cold and they're trying to burn their green wood, which is going to just choke them to death and cause fires. They are setting up heating islands in school gymnasiums and that sort of thing so that the German tribes will have a chance to get to know the tribe, that they welcome, they can all stay warm together around the same heater. So you got Germans buying, you can't even buy a wood burning stove in Germany now. You can hardly buy, they're hiring guards to guard forests now because people are stealing the wood, right? They're in Ireland, they're cutting down forest in Lithuania to ship to Ireland. When Ireland, there's, and lies over in let's talk natural gas. Netherlands, plenty of natural gas at a place called Groningen, and all the infrastructure is there. All you got to do is turn the valve a little bit more to the right, and they'll have plenty of natural gas for Netherlands. They would have plenty of natural gas to run many of these nitrogen-based fertilizer plants, that require natural gas, but they won't do it. Likewise, about 4 hours from me here, I'm in London. Up in Blackpool, they have plenty of natural gas here in the UK. They're leaving it in the ground, even though the infrastructure is already in place. Just turn the valve. That's all you have to do. This isn't complicated. Meanwhile, Germany is talking about shutting down their 3 remaining nuclear plants. Now, what are they going to do? They keep going back and forth on this. You might say, well, they said this yesterday or whatever. Just wait 24 hours or 2 more weeks and they'll say something else. But they are dead set on shutting down those 3 remaining nuclear reactors, even while they're going into a freezing situation. And this is going to be famine. I keep telling people, I keep warning people, I keep calling people famine so they understand it can happen in Europe and it can happen in the United States. You say that to Americans and they go, oh, you've lost your mind. We're the greatest food producers the earth has ever created. We're better than ants, right? No, let's get real. You're not paying attention, right? You're not paying attention. There's been huge droughts. We have sabotage happening from our own government, right? We have the Mississippi actually has problems right now. We have fertilizer. The Mississippi is fairly dry right now. It's hurting us right at harvest time. Fertilizer needs to move up and down, the Mississippi along with food. And the Mississippi is look, this is the Mississippi River to the United States, right? And it's dry right now, right? And so it's not completely dry, of course. There's still cargo, but all these little things, the droughts in Texas and California and I was just in Mexico 4 months ago tracking the migrants, and the migrants happened to walk right past the Corona beer brewery. It's massive. I mean, this Corona beer brewery is unbelievable. I'm like, how do y'all have a brewery out here in the middle of the desert? And there's an aquifer underneath, right? And so shortly after I left, you can, some Google foo or whatever, and you'll see that the president of Mexico said, hey, we're closing down the breweries in northern. So I think that brewery is now closed right after it was on when I was there because I could see the steam and stuff coming out. I mean, they were still doing something. But now apparently it's closed. And Mexico is the biggest beer exporter in the world, export about $5 billion worth of beer every year. What are they going to do? All these breweries are closing due to lack of water, right? And drought. So Texas, beef, all these sorts of things. We've got all these little things that we could overcome if it were just that, and a few more we can overcome because we're very resilient. We have a lot of resilience built into the system, but we also have globalists. We also have others who are methodically sabotaging and openly committing gigacide, and they say it. Now, a couple of years ago, I would understand why people would say that's conspiracy theory. That sounds crazy. I get it. But if you're still saying that now, you're just stupid. And I want to use that word that my grandmother would be upset that I would ever say that word, stupid. You're not supposed to say that. You're not even supposed to say the stupid radio doesn't work, right? But at this point, if you don't realize that this is a methodical global sabotage, you're just stupid. They're saying it with their mouths. They're saying it with their keyboards. They're posting it on the World Economic website, it in books, The Great Reset. They're saying it, and they're executing it. All these fires, some of them are probably coincidental. Some of them are probably background noise, but something happened to the Nord Stream pipelines. Doesn't look accidental, right? And it doesn't look like the Russians did it. And, and now the Russians did shut the pipeline. Why would the Russians actually blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2? That doesn't even make sense. They control the switch. They control the valves. The valves originate in Russia. They put billions of euros into helping build those pipelines. They make a lot of money on those pipelines. That was clearly the United States. Do we have proof? Well, I mean, the United States said at least 4 times that I've seen, quote unquote, President Biden said that something, he's sort of like, I wouldn't park my car right there. Something could happen to it, buddy. I mean, he basically said that about Nord Stream, right? As did others. They directly threatened Nord Stream 2, and then, of course, Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1, bang, offline. So, again, I want to repeat, watch. This is an infrastructure war, Suez Canal, Panama Canal, undersea cables, Norwegian flows, not Nord Stream, but the Norwegian gas flows, Yamal coming through Ukraine from Russia over to Poland and Germany. Watch all these flows. My guess is you're going to see these one by one go offline. Just today, I'll be surprised by the time if we finish this interview if Yamal is even still working right through Ukraine. But I don't know. Mysteriously, it was earlier today. But you see the electrical flow from Sweden to Poland appears to be interrupted. There's a Danish island now that's offline. There's systems in Ukraine that go to Poland, which appear to have been hit with cruise missiles hours ago, right? So, I mean, and one of my friends in Poland, I can't even raise him now. Usually I can raise him instantly, right? And so I think he's fine. He probably just doesn't have electricity or something. I don't know. I'll have to fly over there and see for myself. Actually, I need to get to Texas because we've got another election unfolding. But if you want to call these elections. So, I mean, but the bottom line is we're looking at famines. The globalists have clearly stated their intent. We see the farmers being attacked in Canada, States, everywhere. I mean, Germany, Italy. Look up farmer protest in Belgium. Look up farmer protest in Germany or Canada. It's just everywhere, and it's a methodical takedown, shakedown. We're looking at a situation that has never been seen in human history. At one point, I was doing an interview, and I said this pandemic, famine, war, the pandemic, famine, war, that triangle of death, and the human osmotic pressure that always go together. I said the Panfa War, it always happens in my hundreds of books on war and 80 books on pandemic and famine that I've read, and just going off to wars around the world and seeing stuff everywhere all around the world. She said, you act like you made this up, Michael. And I said, I did. And she said, no, you didn't. It's in the Bible. It's the 4 horsemen. And I said, you're right. I probably got it from the Bible. And it's like, and I forgot that's where I got it from. They knew it 2,000 years ago. So this is nothing new. It is in the Bible. And I was like, oh, sorry about that. Started reading. I was like, yep, there it is. That's how it got in my head. And it was, they knew it 2,000 years ago, 4 horsemen. And here we, and now the 4 horsemen, have been slapped and stampeded by the globe. And now we've got this World War III clearly is unfolding. Will it go nuclear? I don't know. But it clearly looks like the United States is trying to create casus belli to make preemptive strike on Russia. I would not doubt, as we just saw some bridges to Belarus, between Belarus and Ukraine apparently were just attacked. Belarus, of course, is a legitimate target. Belarus has been pumping. When I was in Lithuania last year, I was there for a month. I was with the Lithuanian army in Afghanistan, so I have good contacts there. The Lithuanians were being flooded with migrants that were being pushed in by Lukashenko in Belarus. But what we're looking at here is a widening war. It's out of everybody's control. The only rational figure in the whole group appears to be Putin, and he's a thug. He's a straight up thug, but he is a rational thug. The thug in the White House or whoever's pulling his strings, what's rational and what's irrational? If you want to create a gigacide that kills billions of people, all this stuff makes perfect sense. And it is rational if that's what you want, and you're the Joker, and you want to destroy and see the earth burn. It's completely rational at that point. But if you want to have a life where kids can go to school safely and that sort of thing, is completely irrational. War's out of control. We're going to go into famines. Read 5 books on famines and prepare yourself.
Well, Mike, if I can jump in before we get your last thoughts, just got it across the wires. IMF World Bank chief issues dire warning of recession and inflation. And that's just today. It just came across the wire as we're speaking. And then the other piece, as it was happened on October 8th, of course, you had the transportation minister Wissing for Germany saying that the Sabotage Act on the cable networks were responsible for the outages of train traffic in northern Germany. So look, you and me know where this is headed. We've been involved in combat before on the ground. You've covered it throughout the entire globe, and we know that this is not going to slow down. Fortunately, if, like you said, you want to be for green energy, then maybe you shouldn't be blowing up pipelines that create the largest methane escape in the world. If you're going to be for green energy, maybe we shouldn't be exporting everything to China, which only uses really bad methods in order to be able to extract coal or fuel. Look, even the Japanese, we've been working on a couple of things for them, and I know that they need lumber. And we've been able to at least work through Africa to try to give them some capabilities of getting lumber, possibly from South Africa. But if the administrations that are in charge of the countries are going to drag their feet, you're going to be where you are today. Even the rounds that the Ukrainians need for knowing that the Russians can do a counteroffensive against them in winter, the 152s, if you can't get them out there, you cannot get them to the Ministry of Defense for the Ukrainians. Look, the MOD for Ukrainians had 6 basically contracting officers that for a better term for our people out there who may not know how everything works. 4 of them were so bad and corrupt over the past few months that they're on the run. One may be even arrested, and another one isn't being able to be found. So it's awful what is happening, but it's a reality. And then we'll see where we go. Mike, I know you got to go. You get a hard timeline, but I do want to give you the last word. And I know you're coming back to the States. We'll link up while you're here. But if you have any advice for these so-called intellectuals who are running the war, what's your recommendation?
Well, first of all of our families, everybody watching this comes from a family line that has been through pandemics and famines and migrations. Every one of us. My family got shipwrecked in Bermuda in 1609. We know that because there was an author on the ship, actually, interestingly. They were on their way to Jamestown. They were stuck for 10 months, and they had to make 2 new ships out of cedar. So, we've all of us come from migrants at some point, one including the Native Americans and everybody else. You didn't just pop up in Arizona as a Native American. You know what I mean? You came from somewhere else too. Everybody pretty much has migrated in their family tree, and we've also all been through famines in our family tree. We've all been through wars and pandemic, and we're still here, right? So it's not like it's impossible to get through this. We can definitely get through it. Absolutely. Just study, read 5 books on famine, and prepare yourself, and you'll be fine. You'll work on your human networks. That's vital. It's very important to work on your. One friend in Texas, he he lives in a small town in Texas. He goes to his church and he started taking inventory of everybody, making a spreadsheet, like Excel spreadsheet, Mrs. Smith, 78, here's her skills. And she's like, I don't have any skills. And he starts talking with her. I've forgotten her name. And she's like, and he's like, well, yeah, you do. You raise kids and grandchildren, and don't tell me you don't have any skills, because you got a nice family. You definitely. And she's a widow, and she's like, well, I know how to can beans and stuff like that. And he's like, you know how to can? That's a huge skill. Well, you need it. Okay. You're the colonel of the canning operations, right? So what do you need? Tell me, like, pressure cookers. Do you need what jars and lids and tongs? Stuff. What do you need? How much vinegar? How much salt? What do you need? Tell me. You're in charge, and then you tell me what you need, and I'll go get it. And you can start training the children how to do this stuff, right? And start passing along your teacher, because at some point in your life, you're the learner, and then you're the doer, and then you're the teacher, and pass it along. Now, that phase, your job is to can and teach others to can. And so that, that we can get the doers doing it, the learners learning and the doers doing, and you teaching and running operations. And so just making like a list, can do plumbing, can do this, can do that, electrical, and then be a leader, just be a leader of yourself. And then from there, if you're comfortable with leading one or two people, do that, or be a follower, but be a leader when you're a follower, a self-starter and whatnot, and work on your human network. The people that get through these famines, and my study of famines and war and a lot of time in wars is the people that can work as a team. You're 10 times better off. I mean, and that includes getting through famines and whatnot. You can get right through it. It's just like going through a terrible storm. We're going to have to throw up a little while, but we're going to get through this storm, and we're going to get out the other side, and we're going to go like, whew, that was a close one, but here we are, and so just, get your net together and start working.
Much appreciated, Mike. Like, October is also, as I say to my Polish friends, is Polish American month, but Poland's been buying weaponry from South Korea. And what they're buying is I'm making it to Ukraine. They're buying for their own defense, because they realize this is about to get worse than it is. And for those Americans that may not think about these things, keep in mind, the Ukrainians were in nightclubs the night, a few hours before the invasion took place. And the entire world was telling them that invasion is coming. And Putin was saying, I'm coming. But it was hard for them to wrap their head around it. And I think for those Americans who believe that it cannot happen to this country, how many times you've said, I never thought something like this could happen in my country, and it's happening? Well, it's happening because it can happen. It's a reality. Welcome to human character. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you have individuals who are in charge or are pretty much incompetent. In the past, I used to say American foreign policy is like a drunken sailor. You could just stomp around the world, crush things, you'll be fine. But in this one, you're not going to be fine. So just make sure you get your head on a swivel and understand that reality is behind the door, ready to come in and slap you across the head. For the better terms, I have to watch what I say. I can't use some of the terms we use in the military circles to make sure that my video at least stays on YouTube. So with that said, Mike, much appreciated, brother, as always. I know you did an interview with that kind of lays all these things out. We're going to end up closing the show out with that interview. For our viewers out there, just go to the QR code to look at what Mike is doing also, and read through all his dispatches, and he's on multiple stations out there. And also, I would remind people, the reason why we created United Australian Appeal was because we knew it was getting very bad, especially for the Christians of northern Iraq. And now you see what's happening in Iran. They're having problems just trying to sustain and survive themselves. We were able to get them, at least 30, 40 sheep, this year for them to be able to sustain and try to grow a little food processing center for themselves in the future. And also this year we're supporting the South Sudanese refugees, most of them sitting in refugee camps in Kenya, which has really destabilized that entire region because the World Food Program pulled out, went to Afghanistan, and they can't even do anything there. And that's pretty much it. Okay, Mike, we look forward to seeing you back here, buddy.
Thank you. And you know who would be great to tell you more would be Chuck Holton. He's going back to Ukraine soon.
Yeah, I know. I got to get Chuck on the show. Chuck's been busy with the grandkids. He's been busy with that, and also me and him been talking back and forth about Armenia. Armenia is absolutely getting pummeled by all these actors, and as unfortunately, even they're looking for weapons and food in the future, but they're having problems because they cannot generate the EUCs because their government is just all over the map. Mike, God bless, much appreciated. We'll get Chuck out here, and this is New Paradigms.
Michael Jan, you're in Netherlands. The farmers, there was a fire last night at a food distribution center or one of these food distribution outlets. Tell me about the farmers and tell me about what happened last night, Michael.
Hello, Steve. Yesterday, Misako Ganaha and I were out with farmers all day, and then when cherry farmers actually, and they gave us a bunch of cherries, and the cherry farmers were upset that with these edicts from Brussels, EU bureaucratic edict, that they will not even be able to use cow dung to actually fertilize their cherry trees. You can't even make up this stuff, cow dung, right? You can't. They're not even going to. They can use it right now, but in the future, at the going rate, they will not even be able to use cow dung. So anyway, we spent quite a bit of time talking with these farmers, and then saw on the news feeds that there was this fire happening last night, and it looked like a huge fire. It wasn't that big actually. It burned down this picnic food distribution center, which is an online grocery store. Interestingly, though, some of the major investors are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that's what made it worth coming to. We were curious why there are apparently about 170 of these outlets in Netherlands. We know that Bill Gates is buying up so much farmland in the United States and gaining control over some levels of food production and also, as we can see, distribution. So this picnic store, which burned down last night, it's a complete loss. They basically, you order online and they fill up these trucks over here, which were not burned because the firemen smashed the windows, put them in neutral, and pushed them out. So now they've pushed them back. That's why they're not burned out. But so
Michael,
they load up.
Michael, I know food distribution. I know what you explained to me. Just tell me, where are the farmers right now? What's the status of the farmers versus the EU and taking their property?
Well, Steve, the farmers their organizers have been doing disinformation operations, saying that they're going to do protests, for instance, at Schiphol Airport, and then not doing it. And so the police departments deploy there and they burn up their overtime. And by law, they're only allowed to do so much overtime. So they're doing the same things that you saw in Hong Kong, which I was out in constantly, which was the resistance, burning up the police, making them run here and there, and then the farmers not even going, or they just show up with a few people and then leave. So yesterday they announced that they had some big protests scheduled, and then at the last minute canceled them, but the police were already deployed burning overtime, right? And so now the farmers have announced they're going to do large protest from the 19th to the 22nd of this month, July, in Nijmegen. And will it be an information operation? I don't know, because it's a coin toss on that. But we are definitely in World War III, by the way. This is hybrid warfare. It's highly effective.
Perfect. Michael, you hang on. We'll try to get you in the afternoon show. Remember, Nijmegen is part of one of the bridge too far towns with one of the bridges, the Nijmegen Bridge. Michael, thank you very much.